Welcome. My name is Kate Harmon. I'm the Director of Cross-Campus Engagement for the Lundquist Center for Entrepreneurship. And today on our Getting Ahead series, I'm very excited to have with us Kirby Dyess, who is the principal and owner of Austin Capital Management, where she evaluates and invests in early startups in the Pacific Northwest. So thank you again, Kirby, for joining us today.
Glad to be here.
Thank you. Let's start off by having you share a little bit about your early foundational years in college. Talk to us a little bit about where you went to school, what you majored in, and what you were hoping to be as a college student, right when you were starting off thinking about your career.
Sounds good. Well, actually, I went to college at Linfield College my first 2 years. And then because of an illness from my father, I transferred to the University of Idaho, which would have been closer to home for me. I majored in physics. It was always my dream to major in physics, so that wasn't too unusual. And graduated from the University of Idaho with a degree in physics in about 1968. And what I really wanted to do at that point is become an astronaut. As you can imagine, in the 60s, it was a big thing. And I thought that would be my aspiration. Obviously, things changed.
No, that's amazing. And I think you had told me before you were the first woman to graduate with a physics degree. Is that right?
I was. They tell me that I was. I'm not sure I paid much attention to that. I was too busy studying.
Very good. Well, so you graduated, and then your husband got a job in Portland, as I understand, and you came to the Pacific Northwest. Talk to us a little bit about how you identified your very first job in Portland and what you learned from that experience.
Okay. Well, actually, when we arrived in Portland, there wasn't much available for a physics major. As you can imagine, with a bachelor's degree in physics, you're not going to teach. And so there was some limitation as to what you were looking for. So what I was trying to find is a job where I could learn a little bit about Portland. Since it wasn't the city I grew up in, it was a nice way to kind of find out a little bit. I ended up going to work, and this is going to sound like a funny thing to do, but I went to work as a receptionist for the largest law firm in Portland. My thought was, gosh, if I'm working for the largest law firm, I'm likely to meet a lot of the business leaders because they did a lot of business law. They did divorce, they did, all kinds of law. So as you can imagine, I got a chance to get involved from that standpoint and meet a lot of the clients and certainly meet a lot of the attorneys. And while I was the receptionist, I also was available to do all kinds of other things. It's kind of like when things were not real hopping on the reception desk, then they would call me in to help out with a deposition or call to do bookkeeping, to do whatever was needed in the office. And so I learned a lot about, a lot of general skills that were very helpful. But it was a good introduction to Portland, very much so.
That's great. Well, I know the next position sort of attracted you and due to your science background. You landed a job at United Medical, where you eventually went on to oversee the development of a new product that you actually brought to market. So talk to us a little bit about how you arrived at your next role and the things that you learned in that position.
Well, it was interesting. I really wanted to get something, some type of position back in the sciences. And at this point, I couldn't be too picky. It wasn't going to be physics probably, but it could be something else. So it ended up being biochemistry. And going to work for the laboratory gave me an opportunity to actually go into the sciences in one way or another. And that was really what drew me there. I started out doing a bit of medical testing, and then I got an opportunity to help them with standardization of tests. And that was a real interesting experience because you're starting to think about how do I set standards for blood chemistry levels and things like that. Because United Medical at that point was the largest testing operation in the US, and they brought samples in virtually from all over the world to test, it was a mail order test lab, and that's really how most medical testing got done in those days. And so, the overview that I got was just amazing. And then a couple of other things happened that just kind of brought things home. We discovered how to do hormone testing with a process called radioimmunoassay, and I got a chance to get very current on those kinds of techniques. And then the company got sold to a pharmaceutical company. And when the pharmaceutical company came in, of course, they're looking at the assets that they just bought and saying, well, gee, what can we do with these assets that will build the revenue base for the pharmaceutical company going forward? And one of them was actually starting to look at research and publications on some of the things that we were doing. So I worked very closely with a MD, PhD at what is now OHSU. At that point, it was part of the University of Oregon, by the way. But anyway, it was a great experience because I really got into biochemistry. In fact, I ended up going back to school at night to pursue essentially a biochemistry degree. And so that led to the company deciding, well, gee, between the radioimmunoassay for hormone testing and the work that you've done on diabetes and metabolism and how the interactions happen, and the work that was done on blood chemistry standardization, we had developed a blood chemistry standard as a result of this. They wanted to commercialize all those things. Well, of course, I had no experience there. And but I was very interested in getting involved. And so they brought an executive up from corporate, from Orange County, and she and I started this little company within a company. And we learned from each other, and we learned from everyone else we could touch bases with. We learned accounting from the CFO at that point, learned how to put together a business plan. I mean, I just can't say enough about that experience. It was just from not knowing much of anything to actually getting to the point where you've got a business that is up and going. And at the end of the day, that business grew to be about $80 million, and we sold it to another company. And it was, for all practical purposes, a pretty successful business. Obviously, that technology has been replaced by really better technology today, but it was the first time a doctor could actually do a test in their office. They could actually run a blood chemistry and do it in their office. So it was a way of taking that medical testing and taking it a step further. A lot of fun.
Very cool. Well, and I think that's what's so interesting about your career is that you have this amazing ability to be adaptable, to learning, entirely new industries. And that brings us then to how you arrived at Intel, where you spent the majority of your career at in 1979. Before we start talking about all the different senior C-suite roles that you held at Intel, talk to us a little bit about what was Intel's culture like at that time in terms of the flexibility they had with migrating people from departments to departments so that they can really learn different units within the company.
Yeah, and I think Intel is, to some extent, somewhat the same way. We used to jokingly say at Intel, you had the same boss for maybe 6 months, maybe a year, and then you were moving to work for somebody else, and sometimes in a different department. So it was one of the things that really attracted me. And Intel was, on one hand, very disciplined. On another hand, one of the things that was just quite cool is when I joined the company, it was a requirement that you take at least 8 hours of classroom training every single month. So when you think about that, they were constantly telling people to learn new things and to get up to speed. So, for me, I got a chance to take all of the fab training, and obviously because of my background, the training for me was just a way of applying much of what I had learned in school. So it was really very worthwhile. But they had management courses. They had all kinds of things that you can take, either internally or externally. But they tracked whether or not you were actually continuing to educate yourself as part of Intel, and allowed that flexibility of people to move sideways around the company, and it really made a big difference. The other piece of the culture at Intel is they were very results oriented. What I mean by that is it wasn't that you had to do it the same way. It was really about getting the results. And they were very much into measuring progress against results, measuring everything that went on. And while I think describing results in a general tone is wonderful, but putting some data behind it and really understanding what the outcome might look like in a data sort of way, obviously I related to that very well, and it certainly helped with the success of the company. There's no doubt.
That's great. Well, walk us through the 23 plus years that you were at Intel. Can you walk us through from the very beginning what you led to your most recent position there as you oversaw mergers and acquisitions for Intel Capital?
Okay. Well, actually, I started out in '79 taking a job as an employment supervisor. And yes, doesn't sound like the logical step, but it's a really good, if you're working in employment, you get to know the entire company because you're hiring and you're working with hiring managers all the time. So I got a chance to know the company a way that many other people wouldn't get to know. And I oversaw the fab and technical recruiting as opposed to management recruiting or management talent. I was also their community representative, and at that point, Intel was a relative newcomer to the Portland area. Tektronix was very strong, and so it was really important for them to kind of reach out to the community. So that was kind of a fun thing to do as well. And again, it gave me a chance to get to know how they were perceived, what kinds of things that we do, how can we make a difference in the community, and that sort of thing. So that was fun. Then from there, and I spent a couple of years doing that, and then I moved into data processing, and I became the data processing manager for the for Intel in Oregon. And again, some of it was based on my engineering and physics degree, and obviously I was not a newcomer to doing data processing stuff because we used it for a lot of the data stuff that we did. So it was a fun job from that standpoint, with the exception of they gave me payroll, which is a thankless job because when you make a mistake in payroll, you know about it right away. But anyway, from there I moved into running a global management information center, and we provided services for the entire company all over the globe. And what it was the first step. It was before PCs came on board, and we would actually download data sets into a management data center. And essentially people would be able to access their data and manipulate it. This was all done on mainframes in those days, but we provided the tools and the support and the training so that anyone across the company could access the data they needed and manipulate it the way they did. Obviously that was followed by the personal computer and that connection, but it was an interesting job, to put it mildly. I was around when we brought email into the company, so I know what that process was, which was quite interesting too, but I won't go into that. There was a lot of great stories. And then I went to work for a startup here in Oregon, again, that was called the Personal Computer Enhancement Division. And the Personal Computer Enhancement Division was, in the old PC days, you had these add-on boards that would increase the processing power of your PC, extend the memory, all that sort of thing. Those days are long gone because the technology has changed. But we used to sell retail the boards and the memory chips and the memory boards and the graphics processors and all that sort of thing on an add-in board. We sold it in all kinds of retail outlets. So it was the first time Intel had ever put their name on a retail package. So there was no visual identity for Intel. So we had to start to develop that. And I was the marketing manager for that organization. It was just a whole lot of fun. Just, doing things that were just so out of the box for a very highly technical company. So it was a lot of fun. But I did that for, actually a number of years, and then ended up becoming their business unit manager for the enhancement division, the memory and CPU enhancement division. And then moved from there, and this is going to sound like a really interesting move, but I moved from there to the vice president of human resources for the entire corporation. and, so that was a real challenge, because when I took that job, we were about 26,900 employees. When I left that job 4 years later, we were at 80,000 employees worldwide. And it was an incredible opportunity to just grow with a company and see things in a completely different perspective. You're on the executive staff, you see the company in a very different way. You get to work with the board a little bit. It was wonderful. And then Intel decided that they wanted to do more mergers and acquisitions and set up a mergers and acquisitions team. And I got an opportunity to do that position and grow a team to do it. And then from there, did strategic acquisitions for the company, and then ran the overall operations for what was then Intel Capital. And again, that was, we had, at the time, we had 400 companies all over the world that we'd invested in. Now, during the time I was doing mergers and acquisitions, we did 50 acquisitions in 5 years. So, and we were responsible for making sure that they were successful at the end of the day. So we did the integration process in addition to the due diligence process and the connection with the company in the beginning. So it was a whirlwind and lots of fun and lots of great people to work with. I mean, just incredible talent.
That's amazing. It sounds like such an interesting and diverse career that you had there. One of the things that kind of links all of your experiences is your innate curiosity and love for solving problems. I wonder if you could share with us, how do you tackle a problem? Do you use any kind of specific processes or set of systems in evaluating a problem? Does your scientific training actually help you in breaking down problems that you have to deal with?
Kate, I think we all depend on kind of our backgrounds, and there are probably several ways of going about problem solving. I love problem solving. There's nothing that excites me more than an assignment that says, we have a huge problem here and we don't know quite how to address it. It's like, oh, this sounds like it might be a lot of fun. It's just one of those things that really attracts me. But I think, if I look back on the consistent steps that I used to try to employ with teams as we were going through problem solving, it was really getting clarity around the problem. And I know that sounds like such an obvious thing, but so often everybody looks at the elephant from a different direction, and unfortunately they only see the toe or the tail or the snout, and you're sitting there and you're going, well, what is the real issue here? And let's make sure we're all on the same page of what that is. And then really sitting down and thinking about the clarity around what would happen if we solved it. In other words, what's the outcome that we're looking for here? And then trying to do it not just in terms of general comments, but trying to put some measurements around what that outcome might look like. Then I think usually I like to convene all of the experts, all the people that might know something about this. And I'm a believer that they're not always all internal. 9 times out of 10, there's some really good external expertise, whether it's reaching out to university professors, or it's reaching out to others in the industry or others in another industry for figuring out how you're going to do this. An example, and this is kind of old hat probably, but when Intel decided to do the Intel Inside program, one of the things that they looked at is Dolby. Dolby had done such an incredible job of being, the inside, and yet they were very visible. And we said, yeah, okay, that's the kind of thing that we're looking at. So the NutraSuite did the same thing. So, you look outside and you say, how did you go about doing this? How did this work? What did you do wrong that you wish you'd done a different way, and all of those kinds of things. And then it's a matter of making sure everybody understands their piece of solving the problem and tracking. to the result that you're looking for at the end. But that, as I was thinking back, I said that's probably the way I've done it in almost every position. Again, and I have to say, having the right people involved, it just makes such a big difference.
That makes a lot of sense. No, really good advice there. I know another attribute to your success is your willingness to take risks. Can you discuss with us a little bit about how do you assess or evaluate risks, and how has taking risks benefited your career?
Yeah, it's interesting. My husband would probably tell you how this goes because he's seen it time and time again. But the way I tend to look at a risk is as I look at the highest upside and the most horrible downside. In other words, let's say we take this risk and the upside is looking really, really positive, and then you find out that there's just a horrible downside as you're going in this direction. And what I found is 9 times out of 10, the potential upside was so much better than the thing we all worry about, which is the downside, which is for most individuals is losing your job. And I thought to myself, okay, so I'm going to lose my job. Do I think I will not ever be able to find another one? The answer is, I think I could probably. I can still work at a grocery store. I used to do that when I was in high school. I can work at a bakery. I know how to do things. And so you fall back on, well, I don't think I'm going to starve to death. I think I'll probably, figure out something else to do with my career. And so I always assess risks from that standpoint. And again, it seems to work. Like I say, it's a lot of fun to be able to jump into something and say, we're going to give it all we've got. If it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out, but we'll give it all we can. My husband used to say, boy, he used to say the first 3 months when Kirby takes on a new risk or a new job, I don't see her. She's kind of gone for. And he's right, because I spend my days understanding, what we're about and what we need to do. And I spend my nights reading, picking up anything I can, talking to people in other industries, just trying to figure out what other knowledge do we need to bring to bear here to attack this issue.
That's great. Very strategic. Sounds really, really good. Let's talk about, given the fact that you were in so many varied departments and oversaw these departments, how did your leadership or management skills, what kind of, what things did you find successful in leading the different units that you did and the varied teams that you had reporting to you?
This probably is not a surprise to most people, but talent is critical. In other words, and it's not just assessing it, you need to be able to assess talent very, very effectively. But the other thing is I learned from some of the best interviewers I know how to interview effectively. And there is a skill set attached to that really makes a huge difference. So how you interview, how you get the information to come out in a nice, comfortable way, how you do. I've never ever hired anyone that I didn't do my own reference checks. And I find it very fascinating as I've joined boards of companies, how few CEOs actually do their own reference checks and how few executives do their own reference checks. They delegate it to whoever the recruiter is or somebody else. And it's not a matter of not trusting those individuals. It's more, there is a personal connection that happens when you do your own reference check. And you get stories that help you make sure that the person you're hiring is successful. So you get a sense of how they complement the rest of your team and how you can use that to build something where 1 + 1 = 3 instead of 2, and you get there. So I really focus a lot on hiring, and I spend a lot of time on hiring. I also spent a lot of time with the people in the organization figuring out what they can do that's going to expand their horizons, that they're going to learn from. I remember with my M&A team, it was fascinating because we brought a really good group of diverse background people together for doing the job. There was only 12 of us. It wasn't a huge team, but it was really great to give each one a chance to be a lead on an M&A transaction and make available to them the expertise of the rest of the team. So they not only learned from the acquisition that they were doing, but they also learned from the other people that were, highly motivated to help them be successful. And so thinking about how you assign people and what kinds of things they do so they learn. Because I was part of Intel and because it's probably my nature, I'm a focus on results person. I really pay a lot of attention to what are we trying to accomplish here, and can we put something around it so there's a measurement that says we're making progress or we're not making progress, and be very specific about that. I like to coach people on process if they ask for it. I don't like to coach people on results. I want to have that very well understood right up front as these are the results that we're looking for here. And I'll help wherever I can. I have to say most of the people I've hired, I'm sure are 10 times smarter than I am. So they usually would figure out other ways to do things that I might have not figured out. But again, it works well. And I think it's really important to step back in whatever you're doing in an industry and say, where's the industry going and where do we want to go as a company within that industry or within an industry that is close to it that we want to merge into. And understanding what the culture of the company you want to become should be is more important than reinforcing the culture that you have today. Culture changes take a long time, but understanding where you're going, not just from a business perspective, but what that culture has to be successful, I think is fairly important. So those are kind of the things that, come up as I think about management and leadership and what makes sense there.
That's great. Great advice. Well, right now, your current role as principal and owner of Austin Capital Management is investing in Pacific Northwest companies, early stage startups. Share with us a little bit about what you look for when you are investing or putting your time as a board of part of the board of directors of a company. What kind of things are you looking at to put your time and money in?
Well, honestly, leadership is everything. But beyond that, I always step back for a moment, and as I look at a proposal or a business plan, it has to be something that I can add value to. In other words, I've got to know something about the topic. I may not have to know everything about it, but it has to be in my wheelhouse, so to speak. And so I don't try to invest in things I don't know anything about. That's one. The other thing that I try to do is, if I do know something about the market segment, where it is, then I try to understand the competitive threats, what might replace whatever they're selling, make it really go fast, what would slow it down, all those kinds of things. And then step back and say, do I see a way, my internet connection is unstable, we'll see. Do I see a way did I go away?
No, you're good.
Okay. Yeah, do I see a way for this to be financially viable in a relatively short period of time? So it's, that's very important. And then the team is critical. In other words, thinking about the talent, do they have the right talent for the market segment that they're in? Has that talent had the kind of experiences? Startups are very hard. If you've done one or two of them, you really get better at it. But even if you haven't done one or two of them, and you have a good mentor program of people that you're connected with that have done one or two of them, you're probably better off as well. But I do look for talent. I absolutely, because most of our investments are early stage, the team is everything, because they may have to change directions 2 or 3 times, but the talent on the team can make those changes. So it makes a big difference.
That makes sense. Well, my final question to you is, if a student wanted to follow a similar career path as your own, what advice or best practices do you have for them?
Well, I mean, first and foremost, don't be afraid to move from area of expertise. And you learn some things that will be very helpful, even if you go back to your areas of expertise. And, you know, what you graduate in is interesting, but it's not the only thing you need to worry about. It's just one of those things that really makes a big difference. And always augment whatever you're learning in a new job with something a little more formalized. I'm a big believer that education, constant education, is really important. And that means reading other things, sometimes taking a course here and there, but doing some things that actually, you know, push you to learn new skills and think about things a little bit differently, I think is important. Learn to describe problems in such a way that are clear, and learn to describe results with data. Again, this is my advice. My husband may advise something different, but I believe that when you take on a new job, particularly when it's not necessarily in your area of expertise, it's really important. And I set the time frame as 3 months. I basically say, I have 3 months to understand everything about this job, everything it hits, everything it doesn't hit, who thinks about, how they think about this job. And you can do that in all sorts of ways. I never wasted a coffee. It was always on something that I could find out how something related to something else in the company that I was with. So it makes a big difference. Hire the best and provide lots of challenges. And beyond that, it's really important, if something goes awry, that you stand up and take the hit. And when it goes well, you stand up and give all the credit to the person or the team that you're in. I've never found that to be a bad idea in management. It seems to work really well. And frankly, it's true. They did it. You know, you're merely guiding. And sometimes that, you know, it's just one of those things. And, you know, people will tell me I'm a workaholic from time to time. But I believe working hard really makes a big difference. And I think also finishing things really makes a difference. Don't leave it undone. Get it done, whatever it is. And we in the middle of this, some years ago, we started a horse boarding operation on our farm. We're on 105 acres. And, you know, I use it on the farm the same way. I mean, we have a quality spec. We have, you know, but everything is, you know, set out. The expectations are there. If you're a boarder, if you're somebody working here, you know what the expectations are. If you need help doing it, yeah, I'll be more than happy to help. But we've got to do and finish what we start. So, interesting deal.
That's great. Awesome advice. Thank you. Kirby Dyess is the principal and owner of Austin Capital Management. Thank you so much for sharing your story today, Kirby.
No problem. See you later. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.